Welcome into the Dad Verb podcast. Topics around parenting from the lens of a dad.
Back at it again, guys. Gonna be chatting about a little bit of masculinity here. How has it changed recently? How has it kind of been redefined here in 2024 as we record this? What we grew up with, what generations past has defined masculinity as, isn't exactly how we would define it now. And we're just going to expound on that, explore how we feel is different, why it may be better now than ever before or not. Saunders is here. Ben is here. How are we doing, gentlemen? Ben, how's the family? Everyone feeling all right?
I wish.
No.
Not bad.
I wish.
Not bad. Yeah, so we're not bad. I mean, my daughter stayed home sick today, but it was more of a precaution than anything. She's not super sick. She just keeps waking up with this cough that won't go away. So since, holidays are coming up and I didn't have a crazy meeting schedule today, I just kept her home and let her hang out with me, watch some movies, relax, and she seems to be doing a lot better. So hopefully back to school tomorrow.
Hey man, hopefully
What
that
movies?
cough subsides.
Something good?
Halloween
Town.
My Neighbor Totoro.
Okay.
She's
You're
just old
Studio
enough to start
Ghibli-ing her, huh?
appreciating, Studio Ghibli stuff.
All right.
So it's cool. She likes all the visuals.
We're on the cusp of Halloween as of this recording, and I'll admit something to you guys. It's only because of my kids that I've now seen Nightmare Before Christmas. I have never seen that. I never knew the premise. I've seen the characters, and I know who Tim Burton is. I was like, is this a Christmas movie? Is this a Halloween movie? Like, I've never understood that.
And
now
now
I've
my
argument
wife never seen
about
The
it.
Godfather, and now I'm just like, I've lost a little bit for you. Like, it's just
It's through the kids that I've kind of reignited this passion for
I guess
these,
we
these
know
classic
who among
films.
us is a kid at heart. Just saying.
Oh man, so that was yeah, dude. Halloween's gonna be fun. I'm excited. Are your kids excited to get dressed up and start getting out there?
They're super
Mine
pumped
don't
about it.
Get it yet?
They don't get it yet.
No, they get so we do have a Halloween parade, so they get the candy is thrown from the parade, but the whole costume thing is kind of lost on them still, and the concept of trick-or-treating is not something that's being grasped at this point. Like, we did a weekend Halloween thing where they went around to like little carnival, and they were just like, yes, everybody's giving me a sucker, this is amazing, right? But it didn't like, we had a dozen dum-dums. I mean, they didn't get it. So maybe next year. But we did sit down for a full 90 minutes of Halloween Town, so I'm pretty excited about a Hocus Pocus marathon.
There you go.
In the next few days.
Those I've seen. Those I'm familiar with.
Those are good.
You know what's funny? I've actually never seen those.
You've never seen Hocus?
There you go.
See, like I said,
Never
folks,
seen
we
Hocus
know who the
Pocus.
kid at heart is here.
But
It's not the
Nightmare Before Christmas is one of my favorite movies, like one of my top 5 movies. I watch it every year, multiple times.
Guess what,
I love
Ben?
that one. I've just
seen
never
that
wanted
before.
to watch it.
I've seen that
Once.
film. This is going to be an interesting podcast topic because, when I started creating content, like 6-7 years ago, when Henry was born, I'll never forget one comment that it was meant to be a negative comment, but if anything, it kind of reignited like this passion and fire for the niche that I had chosen to go into, which is making parenting content for fathers. And that comment was, wow, the pussification of the Western male, right? So being an involved dad, someone who's vulnerable, someone who's emotionally available, someone who can share their thoughts and share responsibility of raising children, that contributes to the pussification of the Western male. We're supposed to be gritty and strong men and have beards and chop wood with axes and beat women and drink whiskey and not actually
like
be
how you
there
just
for our
slipped that
kids.
one in there.
Yeah,
Like,
right? There
chop
you go.
wood, drink whiskey. Like, we just
That's what a real
change
man
a tire.
is, right?
Yeah.
That's masculinity, right? They came back from the war, and we don't raise the kids or change the diapers. No, woman, you go to the kitchen, right? I don't think that's exactly how it is nowadays, and I wanted to expound on that. Ben, do you kind of want to lead off this topic, or I kind of let it off? But
Yeah.
in your eyes, in 2024, what do you think, the role of a dad and masculinity in general, how has that shifted in your viewpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a complicated topic, right? Because it's such a broad spectrum of what you're getting to the root of what does it mean to be a man, right? And if I had to boil it down to a couple of things, I think, for me, it's sort of that personal responsibility and accountability in all things, right? Whether that's my work, whether that's parenting at home, its involvement, its engagement, the way that I, provide or protect my family is through my engagement and involvement with them. And so, I think it's really interesting in seeing this shift. There's so many people that I'm sure you've had this, both of you actually, you go out in public and let's say you're wearing one of your kids.
Yep.
And you'll have someone from another generation, usually, older, walk up and say, my husband never did that. My husband never even, held the kids or changed a diaper or put them to sleep. That was all my job. And now I look around and I see dads who are my age, a little bit younger, and you are seeing them engaged and involved with the kids in all aspects. Now, that doesn't necessarily, in my mind, take away from quote unquote masculinity. What it may do is shift someone's idea of what it means to be a man and what the role of a man is in the family. We're no longer sort of relegated to the den to watch sports and have a cold beer brought to us and have no involvement with the kids other than, if little Timmy wants to play baseball, I'll go throw one with him.
That relegation, I don't think that's
right.
considered relegation. If anything, that's kind of like,
right. Yeah, you're just not involved unless you absolutely have to go, discipline somebody.
Right.
And so I think there's this real, I guess for lack of a better term, there's a real sort of dichotomy and split that's sort of brewing and has been for a long time. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with the way we consume content, right? Is if you are not trying to be like the alpha male, right? The whole, the Andrew Tates of the world, the guys who are like, your whole ethos as a man is get as many girls as possible, make as much money as possible, dominate everything around you, right? There's that push of people saying that's what a man is. But what I see around me are men that I respect doing things that men for centuries have not typically done. At least not in our sort of recorded history, right? Like we're doing things where we're primary caregivers in a lot of cases. You see a lot of men out today who can take their kids out by themselves. And you see it in the way people perceive it too. You see it in the compliments that we get, which is sort of actually what kind of kicked off this topic in my mind. Was the one thing that we've talked about before was like all the things that we go out and do with our kids that we get complimented for as dads. So like, oh, you're such a great dad. That if our wife was in the same situation, no one would give them a second look, right? Like taking the kids out to dinner, changing diapers on the back of a car, whatever it is. And so I think this conversation and our actions are fundamentally changing what it means to be a man in the modern world.
Yeah. There's the concept of really being a leader in the family, like it's if I were to boil it down, like, and I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on this, like what do you think makes a man, right? Or a good father, right? And I think there's so many things that would define that, but at the top of that would be a leader, right? And we like to think of leader as like the head coach or like the CEO, but like a leader in such a different, more even important sense, where you're leading a household, you're leading by example for your children, right? I think that is such an important trait that I feel like now we are doing so much more of. I think the way that men led back in the day, there was a form of that, but I don't think it was as much as like an active involvement in the way we are doing it now. We're so much more active in feeding, bathing, a lot of those day-to-day things. Another, thing that a quality of that would be financial responsibility, fiscal responsibility, managing a lot of those finances, being smart with it, having the right impulse control to not actively buy that, so that you can make sure that you have enough put away to feed your family. That I think that is an active that's an extremely important role as a man. I think that you have a lot of chest hair, but like I think that a man who is financially irresponsible is to me pathetic, right? I don't think that that's what a real man does. I think a real man looks after their family and puts them and sets them up for success and leads by example. I think there's so many other ways, but I want to give Saunders a chance here to kind of chime in. I mean, hearing both of us kind of go back and forth, what do you think on this?
I mean, I think I would say we're kind of missing, the point, I guess.
What do you mean?
Right? I don't think either one of you are wrong, but we also have to put it contextually within our society, right? So you roll back the clock to the 1800s and 1870, right? Pre-Civil War. We're in a boom. There's economic growth, right? The nuclear family is pretty much a thing. And yeah, there's the father who's the head of the household and brings in the money and manages everything. And then there's, for the most part, stay-at-home wives, right? Doing the rearing and child rearing. But we don't hear we only have fiction of it was really great or it was really terrible, right? And we don't have
in
news stories.
It was really great or really
right,
terrible.
You've got Little House on the Prairie. You've got Mark Twain. You've got Oliver Twist. You've got these stories that are kind of that turn of the century Victorian era households, and they're either like completely devastating, where the children are neglected and abused, and they survived or they persevered, right?
Yeah.
And I think my point is that we aren't getting the normal, right? The Italian couple who successfully raised all their children and they became bakers and continued the family business, right? Like that's not a story that we have. Whereas fast forward, here we are post what I would call 3 generations of trauma culturally, from wars, poverty, right? The Great Depression, World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam, where we just had generations of dads who were effectively broken by society and they didn't know how to be dads. And then we have the baby boomers who kind of succeeded at being the caregiver, the provider, but they didn't do it healthily, right? And then we got the Gen Xers who did it very unhealthily and created a bunch of crazy people. And then we got the next generation who were helicopter parents, and now we're kind of maturing back into that let's just be calm, noble, normal people and protect our children and family. And I think we have to look at it in concept, because I can't believe in any real way, right, that the founding fathers were all terrible men and constantly beat their kids and treated their wives like crap, but they were noble enough to write the Constitution, right? Or be these great businessmen and thinkers. And so I just think we're being told a story by the media about how terrible we have been as fathers for the last 100 years. And I think that's a very small picture of how fathers have been. And we're getting back to what I would call normal parenting techniques. Does that make sense?
For me, I think the point that I am trying to make, though, is that there is a level of this toxicity in masculinity in culture. I mean, when Ben referenced like these guys like Andrew Tate, right, and all that, and this previous notion of what it is to be a man, masculine,
right.
to
but
never be vulnerable, all that stuff.
Right.
I think that messaging is kind of prevalent. I wouldn't say too prevalent, but like that messaging exists in today's culture.
Mm-hmm.
And
but the opposite messaging exists, right? You're a dad. You shouldn't have an opinion. You should let your wife control it. Well, I think we fall somewhere in the middle, but there's a whole nother set of marketing around be the powerful woman, control your household, make sure your husband does his keeps your financial right. Like the Andrew Tates are a response to another set of extreme ideology that's existing out there. Right.
But I think the point of this conversation is
independent. And I think we're trying to find that middle road, but I don't think that middle road is new. I think that middle road is just finding the return to normal, right? Because if you go back and you look at like codes of chivalry or the Masons codes of honor and how you're supposed to act, right? These ideas aren't new, right? Be loyal to your wife, take care of your family, respect your children. Discipline's changed, sure. But a lot of like even the Stoic things we bring up, these aren't new philosophies. These are philosophies from 500 BC, right? Like these are we're just implementing them.
I would argue though that while the philosophies are there and the ideas are there, that the societal expectation of a man's involvement in raising his children, regardless of whether we're getting to, you know, the point of what it means to be a man or not, but in the vein of parenting and the way that we're involved today has not been seen outside of pockets of like tribal groups, right? Where fathers and mothers take sort of equal responsibility in the rearing of children because it's out of necessity. The whole idea of like it takes a village to raise your kids, like everybody's involved, whether you're male or female. And so I think there's a fundamental shift in the expectations of a father's involvement in rearing of children, not the expectations, the foundational expectations of being a man, but how those foundational expectations are borne out in society. So honor, right, all of that plays out in relationships between and among men. Typically, that's how those codes were applied, right? In business, right, in my relationship with my guy friends, in my relationship potentially with other men in my family, but not necessarily in your relationship with your children always, and how you actually work with them or a part of their lives, because that wasn't an expectation up until really very recently, within, I would say, the last probably 20 to 25 years.
Right. But it's because we removed it as an expectation in the Industrial Revolution. We took the father figure out of the kid's life and we shoved the kid into school and we shoved the father into a factory. And we actually drove that wedge between the family so that we could become an industrialized world. Whereas when you're talking about these pockets that still exist in, right, the jungles of the Amazon or the islands around India or the sub-Saharan African groups, right, where the parents are still there, it's because they never had to, they don't have that wedge. And so we created a wedge, and now we're realizing that that wasn't a good thing. And we're coming back to the idea of it takes a village, right? That dad has to be around, right? And now we have the science to show that, oh, if dad's not there, it leads to very bad things for a culture and a group and a demographic and children, right? And so I think in some sense, we think it's new, but I don't think it's new. I think it's just us returning to a societal norm that's already existed, right?
So you brought up, I completely understand your point. The thing that I want to expound more on is what are those things that we are, I guess, for you, are not new, and that we're drawing back to. What are those qualities? What are those things that truly define masculinity in a way that we are coming back to, as you've laid out?
I mean, I think it's a very simple concept of being stable for your tribe, being that singular point of solidity, right?
In what ways?
Well, just you need someone who right, like there's the whole financial aspect, but I think that's more modern. There's the whole providing resources for your group, whatever that group is, right? All the men contribute to making sure the group succeeds, making sure the group is safe, right? The Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Do you have food? Do you have shelter? Do you have security? Right? And then we can get into the artistic portions of the triangle, or the pyramid, I guess it is, right? And I don't think, if we want to call it money or we want to call it a job or right, I think it comes back to the male responsibility is to define those three and make them stable and secure for your family. And then you can work on adding the rest. Right.
To me, I think there's a much more pronounced emphasis on like emotional literacy and open communication, and vulnerability, and kind of those aspects of it, which I don't think have been traditionally associated with manhood or masculinity, that we are now kind of, trying to have men open up more on and embrace a little bit more of. What are your thoughts on that aspect of things? Because I think that's something that was a little bit more absent in previous generations, where, admitting that you're wrong, or, leading by less aggression, but more open communication tactics. I think that's kind of something that, I guess you can say that we're returning to, but I think that that's something that was like a little bit more absent that I didn't see as much growing up as well.
Well, right. And I think I think what we're seeing is we don't have the perception of those things existing in our fathers, right? In our grandfathers. But I think if you turn around and look at some cultures like, for example, the Orthodox Judaism culture, right? You can be mad at them for a number of reasons and how they treat their members or their laws or their rules. But they also have a culture that's lasted for a very long time, and there are specific roles for men and women, and they really, not to say there aren't abuses in the culture, but for the most part, they are raising healthy, successful children following their culturally defined social rules for how a father behaves, right? And I think we're trying to get to a bigger picture of what that is and define it for our society, but I don't think I think we're rediscovering. I don't think we're inventing new things, right? And I say that because I want to say things like, there's no way that Alexander the Great had a terrible father, right? Like his father couldn't have been more than 20 at the time, right? Because he died at 30. I mean, there's just no way he couldn't have been a bad person.
No, I don't think he was a bad person, but I bet he suppressed his emotions in front of his children a lot more than he would have in 2024. You know what I mean? Like that.
Right, but to be fair, we all do that, right? We've already all talked about on this podcast how we've suppressed our anger or our wanting to lash out when our kids do something, right? You're implying that's not suppressing your vulnerability is a benefit, right? But you should definitely suppress your anger or your rage because if you let that out, now you're just beating your kids for whatever reason or yelling at your kids.
But I think that's the difference, right? It's not suppression. And that's where we as modern dads struggle, right? It's this idea of having healthy outlets for aggression and being emotionally stable enough and have the tool set to be able to manage those feelings when they come up. And that's where the expectations are starting to shift, right? It used to be relatively widely accepted for probably several generations that if a dad got angry and beat his kids, there was probably something deserving in that, right? It was just accepted. Now, legally and societally, no longer really accepted. Still happens a lot, but there is, I think, a fundamental shift towards fathers trying to not only deal with, when we think about protect, provide, stability, all of those things. Yes, there's the financial. Yes, there's the physical. Yes, you should be a capable person, right? Capable human being. You shouldn't be incapable of taking care of yourself or others. But the capable of taking care of myself and others has to go beyond the mask that we wear as men, right? This sort of idea that we are what we present to the world, and then there's nothing below
Right.
the surface. And then all those things below the surface are repressed anger, repressed childhood traumas, repressed, whatever, right? And not having the tools to manage those, and or actively seeking the tools to build the tools to manage those. That is what's becoming less and less acceptable across society, because we're saying, like, look, if we want to raise healthy, resilient children, beating them into submission is not it. Yelling at them is not it. It's not going to work, and it's been borne out. You've kind of seen that screaming at your kids is not going to make them any better. It's actually going to make them brittle and less able to deal with difficult situations than if they are raised in a household by someone who has gone through the work to deal with those things. And so that's why I think the expectations are shifting, right? Like you said, I mean, raised by generations of broken men who didn't have the tools to manage themselves. And that was borne out in physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse for generations, which led to brittle, maybe physically strong, but emotionally weak men.
Right. But I think if we were to be honest about the conversation, right, that isn't the norm and has never been the norm, because if it was the norm and we were producing a bunch of brittle human beings, we would have never gotten to the point as a society where we can do the work to understand that we need to improve, right? Because we would already been broken and non-functioning decades, if not centuries ago, right? So the fact that we have created a society in some part indicates that while we know that on the edges these things are bad and that some children do not respond to them, we also know that it doesn't break every child, and it doesn't break all of the children, and people do still succeed in spite of any of these adversities that we've thrown at them, right? And that's borne out in the sheer fact that we are 2,000 years plus the Roman Empire, right? We're 3,000 centuries before that into the ancient Egyptian Empire. And I'm not saying they're all successful, and I'm not saying we should sit here and go back to whipping our children, right? But I think I think the modern way to look at this is, if you do these things, your child will be unsuccessful. Well, that isn't actually true, right? Your child will have more difficulties as an adult. It will be harder for them to cope. They will have things they have to overcome that they shouldn't, or they may not have had you chosen a different path. And we should look at choosing those paths. And what we're talking about is, how do we choose and navigate that path? But as a society on whole, when we look at the big numbers, we as fathers are not failing because the society is growing and changing and becoming more fruitful overall, right? And if we were failing, the society would be failing, right? I'm very esoteric right now. I'm sorry.
You're good. Listen,
you triggered my philosopher.
I think this topic probably can go way deeper than a simple 30-minute conversation between three guys. I think there are so many thoughts, and when you add in religion, upbringing, just different worldviews, geography, we're just here in the States, there's so many different thoughts and takes on this. People who fully think that, yes, we are the absolute embodiment of the pussification of the Western male, and we're stupid. While others may fully agree, only with one of us, or not. But I'm genuinely curious to hear what your thoughts are on this topic. For now, we're just going to put this to rest. Maybe we can revisit this based off of other comments that will filter in. Before we sign off, though, need to give a shout out to Huckberry, who's been supporting dads from a fashion standpoint, hooking us up with fresh wares, whether it's clothes, shorts, shoes, glasses. I love their glasses that they hooked me up with. I don't have them on me right now, but they have fully replaced my Ray-Bans. But if you swing over to huckberry.com, we've got that linked in the show notes. You can check out fresh fits for any dad. Thank you to Huckberry for sponsoring and supporting all dads, as well as the Dad Verb podcast and the Dad Verb YouTube channel. Anyway, again, deep topic, guys. So please let us know your thoughts on masculinity, has it changed for the better? Has it changed for the worse? Has it changed at all? Do you care? Let us know. Thank you for listening.
Do you care that we just spent 30 minutes talking about it? Let us know. Yeah.
Super pumped to be ranking Thanksgiving sides in another episode. Very different tone shift. Anyway, guys, we'll leave you with that. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Huckberry for sponsoring, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.